as if your scope, there's lots of capacity in this country at the mid and small enterprise level. And there are lots of forms of U.S. government insurance and small business administration programs that can help the small and medium-sized U.S. businessman feel like they, and in fact obtain political risk insurance, credit insurance, and other forms of government guarantees that can give them a bit of a sense of comfort that their risk is going to be mitigated through the government program. And oh, by the way, there's this Turkish entrepreneur who's like-minded and really can give you, guide you through how to do business in these other markets. So I don't know, it's sort of a rambling discourse, but I thought I'd share with you a little of my experience, also share with you where the US-Turkish Business Council is going, and very happy to answer questions. And also, please, if you've got some ideas about your own experiences and where you think there are some log jams, some problems, obstacles that perhaps the Business Council can address as advisors to our two governments, please say so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnston. Now, we will go into the Q&A session, and if you allow me, let me ask the first probably a couple of questions. Actually, I'm sure a lot of you in the audience who understands both cultures, the Turks who lived in this country and understands this culture well, and the Americans who have done business or who have relations with Turkey, can understand both gentlemen and their and what they are saying properly. Now, when both of the Mr. Kalsin and Mr. Johnston, when they were talking, I was in that position that I understand perfectly what they say and what they mean. But let me pick up an example when Mr. Kalsin says that the Turks know the culture and the environment of doing business in those countries, and Americans have the experience of doing something similar long back in history after the Second World War and after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So this is maybe not in the same proportions, but it is something, a similar process that is expected in the next 10 to 30 years in the region. But let me go, even though Mr. Johnston, when he was speaking, he gave some examples of like Iraq would be a very good case where both countries can cooperate tremendously at the corporations. But let me throw a couple of ideas, and then I will put them in the question forms, and then I'll open up the discussion for the floor. One is, if you look back the Turkish-American relations, in terms of how to handle the economic ties, how to make them diversified, how to make them bigger, you could see so many initiatives in the last 25, 30 years. I remember Turkish President Erol, and I'm talking late 1980s, that when he was asked a couple of times on the beginning of his visit to the United States, and at that time Turkey is one of the recipients of the foreign aid of the United States, he was very specific on his answer that the Turkey did not want any aid, but wanted to be a good trade partner with the U.S. Now, 20 years after those words, we are almost still saying the same thing, but obviously the situation is not exactly the same. It is much better at this point, but the basic logic are the same. Turkey and U.S. wants to be good trade partners of a diversified trade. Now, there are a lot of initiatives, but an observation could tell you that most of these initiatives did not survive from one administration to next administration in the United States, or from one government to next government in Turkey. And you can see almost all the Turkish business associations, from TÜSİAD to TOB to MUSIAD to TÜSKON, I mean, they have learned the process and they have local offices in the United States and they understand this country much better. And on the US side, we may not, we cannot see probably the same level of interest in understanding, and I do perfectly understand that in this country, Turkey competes with Brazil, China, and India, and Taiwan, and a lot of other countries where there is only one United States, if you look back in terms of market size and in terms of economy size. What can be done, and the specific question is, to make an initiative to sustain itself, to survive from one administration to next, from one government to next? Would it be that there should be more civilian involvement, the business associations and businessmen themselves? And the second question, and on a different area, that can we be, I mean, if you could, can you be more specific in terms of what lines of businesses that Turkish and American companies, and in which countries? Maybe Libya would be a better country than Jordan, or so the experiences, because both country knows what is the accumulated experiences on which area. So which sectors or which lines of businesses and which countries, so that the prioritization could be done in the relations. So let's start with those, and if you would like to, and then we will open up to the floor.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me give you some example about in the last, let's say, 30 years, about Turkish foreign trade running. We are very experienced doing business with Europe. Okay. Especially we started with the numbers of Germany. Okay, maybe there are a lot of Turkish people living in Germany. Turkish origin, I think, more than 3 million, sorry. It helped a lot, of course, especially after 60s, a lot of Turkish workers and business owners integrated to Germany. It helped a lot, of course, but maybe we close each other, perhaps. We know each other very well, especially in business. We know what they expect. We know their market very well, especially about consumers' desires. Turkish businessmen, Turkish manufacturers know which products can be sellable in their markets. And I think we have stopped discussing the ways, the directions with the politics, with the governments, bureaucrats, whatever. I mean, especially in the last 30 years, we have been discussing only with the businessmen or the representatives of NGOs, how we can increase our numbers, our foreign trade. So, I mean, we are talking business, but we are doing this with the American businessmen or with the Americans. Okay, I am selling this one. I would like to show this to you. I'm just explaining in a practical way. This product we can sell in this price, in this capacity. They don't know us very well. They don't know our culture. And they say, oh, it's a very good product. It's looking good. Okay, let's do business. Now let me think about it. Or maybe I will go back to you later on and go back his country, coming back to his country, and then no more connection. Okay, it has been many years. I did myself some business in the beginning of 90s, 20 years ago. I tried some business here, contact a lot of businessmen, and stayed here for a while, especially in textile business at the time. We have a manufacturer in Istanbul, and we had a lot of difficulties to get into the market. But okay, this is maybe a specific example. But I succeeded to sell some goods and also increased a lot in a short time. But after that, we thought that it was early for us to get into this market. Let's go back to Europe, do business with Europeans. But it has been more than 20 years. Still, we are talking the same things. We are having in the same situation. I think we have to find out, as Mr. Chairman mentioned about, we have to find out the solution, and we have to come all together, politicians, academicians, businessmen, NGOs, to find out the way. Only the politicians, like especially in the last few years, a lot of congressmen, politicians have been visiting our country. Also, on the other side, a lot of politicians have been visiting USA. They have been trying to find out the way. But I think one leg is missing. We have a lot of, as Mr. Chairman mentioned, we have a lot of NGOs in the business area who have been trying to increase their numbers, their members, foreign trade numbers in Turkey. And it's doubling, tripling with Africa, even with Europe. Our exports to Europe, 50% of export only industrial materials to Europe. We have been increasing our export to Russia in double, triple, for example, especially in the last few years. Every year we are increasing billion dollars of export. Also, we have been having a lot of investment from those countries. If you have no investment in both countries, you cannot improve, you cannot increase your numbers. First of all, we have to have investments, especially in the last period, in the last 10 years. We have a lot of new regulations to have foreign investment in our country. And the government support this foreign investors can come our country. There are a lot of
incentives.
Incentives, yeah. And so there are a lot of opportunities in our country. A lot of educated people in manufacturing, technical people, and our company, for example, we are very well experienced in North Africa, in the Middle East, especially in construction, in food industry, logistics, in Turkish republics in Asia, also in Europe. We have been doing a lot of partnership with European companies, Turkish construction companies I think it was last year, the second most successful country in the world. Our construction contractors, especially contractors. I think number one is China, the second one is Turkey, and the third one is the USA. So we can have a lot of partnership, cooperation in the third countries together, especially in Arab countries, for example, especially in the last period. But I think politicians, I believe, has to change the mentality. They have to decide exactly to have a partnership in economy also, not only in politics and or maybe military. I think first of all the politicians have to decide for this. It has to be the strategy of the government, first of all. And second, the business, they have to push businessmen or who represent businessmen, the NGOs especially, have to push them come together in Turkey or in the USA or in third countries. For example, in the last except in the last few years, before, if you take a look in the past, a lot of politicians visit our country, but no businessmen, no NGOs, nobody come to Turkey to see what's going on over there. Even now, I mean, it is not enough. You have to push. I know there are a lot of Chamber of Commerce in USA, there are a lot of NGOs, it's a big country, there are a lot of states, okay. But we have to start step by step, maybe state by state. Maybe, I don't know what is the strategy from USA side. So we can see the result perhaps altogether.
If I could make an observation, I agree with you that the governments need to, and I think they are actually, the council, the formation of the council is a manifestation of their recognition that one of the, as you say, one of the legs of the stool is missing. But I think too, that, as I said when I started speaking, the economy of Turkey has changed. It's changed dramatically. It's become far more sophisticated. And with that, when you look at doing business here in the United States, yes, our government has a role to play, but it's primarily seen as a negative, not too much as a positive. They're providing incentives, things like that. Yes, we have our agencies like Exim Bank and Trade Development Agency, overseas private investment corporation. But the mentality, the business mentality in the United States versus the business mentality in Turkey is still a bit different. Because as your remarks suggest to me, the government in Turkey still is a major factor in how Turkish business plans itself and goes even decides what markets it's going to try to pursue. Whereas in the United States, the U.S. government has taken a very active program under this administration to promote exports, and yeah, they've got a role to play in negotiating trade agreements, which hopefully now we're a bit back on track. But the government's role is far less in U.S. business mentality than I think it is in Turkey. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that therefore we can't, as business communities, communicate. But I think your question, which is a very good one, is how do we develop a mechanism for sustaining a better understanding of how to do business with one another, what our markets offer as opportunities. It was striking to me, you point out, Turks have done extremely well in Europe, doing extremely well in places like Africa and Central Asia and the Middle East. But, it's just not clicking here. And that's, I think, as a general proposition, you're certainly right. Just demonstrate that. And I keep asking myself, and I don't have the answer, why is it that Turks do so well in a place like even Europe, which is probably the most comparable market to the United States market? What is it that has allowed for this understanding of the market, the ability to penetrate it effectively? Being members of the European Free Trade Area is giving you that direct access. But then something else happened that allowed Turkish companies to really have a sense of comfort in further developing their market presence there. Whereas in the United States, it hasn't worked that way. My impression, and anybody can disagree with me, is that for some reason, the United States, number one, is the logistics of getting product, if you're thinking about exporting to the U.S., it's just a lot more expensive and it's a lot more complicated. That's one major problem for Turkish product entering the United States. Second thing is the United States system is extremely complicated. There's no question about that. And when you're given the opportunity to either go into the European market or somewhere in the region, when you take into account the logistical cost, relative costs, And then you take into account these complexities, the regulatory complexities of entering in the market. It would strike me, it's sort of a no-brainer if I were a Turkish business person to want to go to Europe rather than go to the United States. Now, as you try to diversify your markets, it makes sense to try to penetrate the United States. But I think in the long run, you're still going to run into this question of complexity, cost, transport costs, and pretty serious heavy-duty competition from the Chinese or from maybe Mexico and certain types of pipelines. So it's not an easy market. The United States is not an easy market to penetrate by virtue of its I'll call it its vast competitiveness. And I'm wondering whether that's also a factor in why Turkish companies are doing better in places like Africa or in places like the Middle East, where that competitive regime is not quite as well developed. Sorry. So that's not necessarily, the magic answer to the problem, but I do think it helps characterize the issue a bit. And I don't know, I don't have a solution for it. I think you alluded to one thing, which is invest, in the country, and it's with investment that comes the familiarity. And then you're putting a lot of capital at risk, if you will, if it doesn't work well. But if you partner first and foremost with a U.S. company, and then get a feel for the market that way, with a trusted, if you will, business ally, I think that's probably an easier way to segue into an investment here at some point. It certainly it works just as it does on the flip side. For an American company to try to penetrate the Turkish market, to invest versus maybe partnering with a Turkish company and then evolve that into an investment makes more sense. I'm thinking of it in terms of as a counselor when I was dealing with companies who were thinking of doing it either way. I would always recommend going slow and steady and gradually, not throwing all your eggs into one basket.
Mr. Johnston, I would like to answer your question. How Turkish businessmen they are successful in Africa, in the Middle East. How can we do this? Okay, because in that area they respect Turkish economy, they respect Turkish people, Turkish businessmen, Turkish businessmen's success. They know Turkey very well. For example, let me give you an example from MUSIAD. MUSIAD is established in 1990 in Istanbul. It has been 21 years old. Until that time, MUSIAD has been operating, especially in those areas. We have more than 100 representatives in the world, but most of them are in that area, in those areas. We have representatives in Jordan, in Libya, in Algeria, in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in Syria, and in Iran, in Yemen, almost all of them. MUSIAD is well experienced in that area, but from 90s, not new. And I tell you what, I think you don't know us very well. Let's tell the truth. And you don't try to know us. You don't want to try. For example, you have given us an example. In Jordan, you said, if we bring a company or a contact to an American company, this is my brother, I know this company in Jordan, let's do business. Don't do that. We have a lot of international companies. As I told you, Turkey is the number 2 in the world in construction company. We have been doing business in Afghanistan, in Germany, in the USA, in Africa, in Angola, in Libya, wherever you say in the world, we have been doing business, not only in construction business, in food industry, in textile, Turkey, especially our industrial goods, have been exporting all over the world. Maybe our numbers is not similar to American figures, but Turkish businessmen is well experienced doing business with the foreigners. That's why, okay, politicians of course have been helping. Okay, our cultures are similar in the area. Maybe from Ottoman Empire, as you know, from the history, this helps a lot. Especially in the last period, democratic developments, they have been trying to have Turkey as an example. But the most important point is they know us very well. They know how we do business. They have been trying to communicate. Plus, I mean, they also make an effort. They try to make an effort. You don't make any effort to do business with Turkish businessmen, big Turkish companies. We have a lot of Turkish companies who are international companies. I mean, Turkish automotive. Do you have any idea? I mean, do you mean, of course, I am talking to an American businessman. Do you have any idea about Turkish automotive industry? I mean, it's a very big industry now in Europe. All the famous labels have been competing to invest in Turkey now. Because there are also Turkish market is very popular for them. Also, they can, when they invest in Turkey, they can export to Europe, to Africa, to Asia,
For the
East. Yeah.
Definitely.
And not only automotive business, of course, for other business we can do anything.
Before to let us take a couple of questions. So, I'm sorry, but
Let me give you just one sentence. Last October, last year, we have an organization, international, which is called International Business Forum. That's the biggest organization in the Middle East and North Africa. 3,400 businessmen participated in this organization, came to Istanbul. At the same time, we have organized MUSIAD International Trade Fair. Our members participated in this fair and showed their products. And more than 100, we got more than 100,000 visitors, of course, but especially around 20,000 foreigners visited our fair, and they communicate with our members, and we have been selling, buying, or investing together in this area. 3,400 businessmen from the Islamic world, from Arab countries. How many, can you calculate how many American businessmen visited our country? Maybe not so much, not so many. Yeah? So we have to come together first. We have to have an organization together.
all right, let us open up. Please.
Open the floor. My name is Murat Güzel. I'm vice chairman of the ARKON, which is the partner organization for the MUSIAD in the United States. And I myself a businessman, and we are doing both trade to the US and to Turkey. So I know the difficulties in the both sections. So we import stuff from Turkey to here, and also we export agricultural product from US to Turkey. So I am kind of disagree with Mr. Johnston about the US is a very complex system to sell here. But I think the number one reason is so simple, and it's distance. And most people in Turkey, they prefer to sell it to the European countries or neighboring countries, and it's quicker, they see what's going on, and they can get their money quickly. And also payment terms in the Europe is very quick. Sometimes they pay in advance. But in the US, you have like net 30s, like minimum. So you get, if you ship something to the US, you will not get your money less than 2 months in most of the cases. And also in the US system, like for example, the food system or agricultural product system, is much easier than the standard of the European standards. As Europe standards on the agriculture is much tougher than the FDA standard. FDA only inspect about 2% of the goods come from Turkey to here. And another reason probably the U.S. businessmen, the Turkish people not selling a lot to U.S. Beside the distance and the payment terms, that they need to come here. They need to work on it. And because in U.S. it's a very large customers here available, and then usually Turkish people sell to the importers in the East Coast or West Coast. They need to go to real corporate America to sell it, which we are trying to do right now. And once you get in the door, it's difficult to open it, but once you open it, it's easy to business. So probably this may help shed some light on it. And another thing is that I also kindly disagree, Mr. Johnston, that you said Turkish people need to know about, first of all, start with the financial statements. Remember? That kind of like put a very light weight on it. So Turkish people, if they want to do business here, they are more than that. They have all those kind of set of the document. They just need to come over here. Thank you.
May I follow up? You said, because this is very interesting, you said the FDA inspections here are less stringent than in the European Union?
Standard, yes. Standard in the US standard, food standard, for example, FDA, since we deal with agricultural product,
Right.
is much less, standard-wise, European is tougher than the US standard. And the quality-wise, because they may reject your product back, they have so much testing done. In the US, they are trying to get tougher, but it's still not, it's very easy to do business with the US. But once you open that door, obviously. And also FDA inspect only 2% of the stuff coming to the US ports. They cannot monitor everything.
It's a very important point,
Yes.
because one of the great areas of,
Agricultural products.
yeah, agricultural and food products.
Turkey is, how we started doing business with the Europe. Turkey is the agricultural backyard of the Europe, so it was close, and we are very good on that. Even the Turkish standard right now is better than the U.S. standard. And also another reason, maybe fourth reason, the price, because the U.S. companies are so large, they demand the lowest possible price, and many of the Turkish agricultural product companies, they rather sell to Europe because they can always sell to Europe 5 to 10% higher than the US. They buy more, they want the cheapest stuff, but with just the average quality, so to speak, in general. Thank you.
Right. Please.
Abdullah TÜSİAD. My question is for Mr. Johnston. Rick, when you were making your remarks, you mentioned about the differences between Turkish companies and U.S. companies in decision-making process, especially when you touched upon the relative difference or difficulty as most Turkish companies are small and private and most U.S. companies are public companies. I think, I agree with you, but in addition to that, I believe the size of the company matters as well. In bigger companies, you see a more complicated decision-making process, and it takes a lot of time, for such companies to make such decisions and follow the opportunities in new markets. And you see that in Turkey as well. In most of those geographies, you see small and medium companies, but you don't see large Turkish companies operating in those geographies. If they go, usually 10, 15 years later. It takes time for them to really, but I have a question. You of course touch upon the risks that exist in those markets, especially in the Middle East after the Arab Spring, and the U.S. Government has, of course, through OPEC, EXIM, and maybe some other agencies, have some programs to minimize the risk businesses are taking there. But is there any precedent to creating a kind of joint risk reduction mechanism in a particular country or geography? I mean, maybe a US program only, or a program that was developed together with another country to really provide incentives to US companies and companies of the other country to do business in a particular geography? And can we develop one together, the US and Turkish governments, for the companies from the two countries?
Well, it's an excellent point, and it's one that, to the best of my knowledge, the U.S. and the Turkish Exim banks have in the past toyed with some sort of joint program. Last time I was aware of an initiative that almost came to fruition was about 15 years ago. It was quite a while ago. My own personal feeling, and it's something that I'm urging my colleagues in the Business Council to pursue, is this exact idea, where we particularly, I don't know about the investment insurance side of it, or necessarily the export finance side of it, but in terms of feasibility studies, particularly for U.S. companies, as anybody who's done a feasibility study knows, it's almost a foregone conclusion that you're probably going to do business there, even though that's ostensibly the point of the feasibility study, is to tell you whether you should or not. But when you actually launch in performing a feasibility study, it's more ultimately oriented towards, okay, I really do want to do business here, but how do I do it effectively? And the net result is that the feasibility study format, in my mind, if we can get the two countries to collaborate and have the governments kick in matching funds, or however you wanted to design it, so that actually it encourages a U.S. party to find a Turkish party to come together to collaborate on a feasibility study for whether it's Jordan or Libya or wherever. You immediately force a very likely partnership to take place, and you also allow